Welcome. In this video, I would like to address the use of citations in scholarly writing that is produced in APA style. The American Psychological Association has published a text that addresses the use of APA style in scholarly writing. The publication manual of the American Psychological Association is currently in the 7th edition, and the details I present in this video will come from this book. I would like to read a snippet from the publication manual of the American Psychological Association. In Chapter 8, Section 8.1, Appropriate Level of Citation, the text begins, "Cite the work of those individuals whose ideas, theories, or research have directly influenced your work." I don't disagree with that statement. However, I think it's not sufficiently broad enough. Many times during the course of research, I acquire data that I don't need immediately in the paper that I'm preparing, but I put the data in the back of my mind, and it might crop up when I'm writing a paper on a similar topic. It's probably a good idea that I identify the source of that data that's been in the back of my mind, bouncing around for a few weeks, because it influenced my work, even though I can't say it directly influenced my current project. So this harkens back to the need for a good annotated bibliography whenever conducting research. We need to keep track of where we learned things and who said what and even when was it said or written. I'm again referring to that same section in the publication manual, section 8.1. The manual recommends citing primary sources whenever available. A primary source is the principal source of data, such as an observer of a phenomenon writing about the phenomenon, not a journalist's reportage of the paper that was produced by the observer. The journalist, in this case, is a secondary source of data. So when conducting research, you will frequently find that authors of well-written scholarly papers refer to other sources as possibly the experimenters or the observers. In those cases, don't cite the paper you have at hand if you can get a copy of the original document from the primary source. Seek to find that primary source. Now, the identification of data sources applies both when quoting the source and when taking the data that the source presented and putting it in your own words. That's called paraphrasing, and that's the more common type of academic reporting. Simply duplicating someone else's work doesn't move forward the general state of knowledge. It just duplicates what already existed. Now, in a literature course or a religion course, or in some cases in sociology courses in which interviews were conducted, it's important to accurately quote the source of the data so that there's no coloring, no bias added to the reporting. But in most scholarly papers, you'll find that you will produce better papers if you paraphrase your data sources rather than quoting them. And I have a general rule for students in my classes, whether I'm teaching writing or a business topic or computer security. I tell my students, no quotations are allowed without my express permission for each quotation desired. So that requires a student to come to me when writing a paper and make an argument for why a particular quotation should be used in the paper. And I can tell you, in recent memory, in the last 10 years, I can't recall ever approving a quotation in any of my classes. I find the students produce better quality work, have to think more deeply about their research data when they're required to paraphrase the data sources. One more important attribute of citation in APA style is, with only one exception, every citation included in a document must have a complementary entry in the references list. In other words, for each time a data source is identified, all right, I should say it this way. For each data source that is identified, there must be an entry in the references list so that the reader of your paper can acquire a copy of the data that you have cited. The one exception is a personal communication. If you include in your paper a citation to a personal communication, a phone call, a face-to-face interview, an email message, some communication that was in a medium that is not publicly available, that citation does not take a complementary entry in the references list. Here I'm displaying a Microsoft Word document in which there is text written in APA style. I direct your attention to this statement here. Nonverbal constructions pose a memorability challenge to users. The data that supports my claim came from a paper written by Nelson and Vu in the year 2010. Here, if users employed mnemonic devices to aid memorability, the data to support that claim came from Banau and Shutova in 2012. Now I'm going to kill two birds with one stone here. These are called citations. They identify the source of the data that was used in order to make a claim. In other words, I am paraphrasing the data that Banau and Shutova presented. In the next paragraph, I make a statement regarding strong text strings or graphical images. The data came from Biddle et al. And Banau et al. Now, I'd like you to compare two citations. Here, Banau and Shutova in 2012, and here, Biddle as well as Banau et al. In 2012. This is an astute reader can determine that the data about mnemonic devices came from one paper that was written by two authors, and the data about text strings and graphical images came from two different papers, Biddle's and colleagues, as well as Banau and colleagues, plural. So, while this paper from Bonneau et al. Was written in 2012, it's not the same paper as the Bonneau and Chutova in 2012. Now, Bonneau is a fairly prolific academic researcher, so there are multiple papers written under the Bonneau name every year. In fact, here's a third paper, Bonneau and Zhu in 2012. So right within the space of just 2 short paragraphs, I've cited 3 papers that were in which the primary author was the same, and all 3 papers were written in the same year. Here I'm displaying the references page from the same document. The first citation is to Biddle and 2 colleagues. That's why the citation was written as Biddle et al., because there were 3 or more authors contributing to the paper. Et al. Is simply the abbreviation of the Latin phrase et ali, which means and others. So Biddle et al. Translates into English as Biddle and others. I'd like you to look at the 3 Bonneau reference entries. Here's the one, Bonneau, Hurley, and Urschat and Stagiano. And I apologize if I'm mispronouncing these names. They're not familiar to me orally. I've only read their works. This is the citation, this is the entry to the citation Bonneau and others, Bonneau et al., 2012. Here's the Bonneau and Chutova 2012 reference entry, and here's the Bonneau and Zhu 2012 reference entry. So each of those citations that I showed in the text of the document have a complementary reference entry at the end of the paper. Here, I've opened a new Microsoft Word document in which I've created examples of the most common contents of citations. If one author was identified in a paper, the author's surname, comma, and the year of publication is included in the citation. 2 authors, both authors are named, and they're conjoined using an ampersand. When 3 or more authors are identified, the first author, the primary author, is identified, and then the phrase et al. Is used. In all 3 cases, the year of publication is included. Now, there are some formatting options to the use of citations. There are also some options for inclusion of additional information within citations, and I'd like to address those details now. Here I've created 3 new entries that I identified in bold text. It's possible, in addition to placing the author's name within the parenthetical citation, to include the author's name within the syntax of a sentence. For example, if one author were named, the sentence could begin, Smith reported, blah, blah, blah. In this case, the only information included within a parenthetical citation is the year of publication, because the author had previously been named within the sentence. And it's common for the parenthetical citation that includes only the year to immediately follow the author's name. So Smith in 2022 reported blah, blah, blah. When two authors contribute to a paper, if they're named within the narrative, within the sentence, then the ampersand is not used, and instead the word "and" is used. Smith and Abbott reported. However, if three or more authors contributed to a paper, then the Latin phrase et al. Is used. Smith et al. Reported. And in all three cases, the only parenthetical data is the year of publication. Here I've identified what I think are special cases for APA-style citations. It's fairly common to cite multiple data sources when presenting a statement of fact. In the first one, citing multiple sources, Abbott, Smith, and Williams each wrote a paper that I have cited. The order of the authors listed within the citation is alphabetical. So even though Williams wrote a paper in 2021 that predated Abbott and Smith's papers in 2022, Abbott is listed first, then Smith, then Williams. A comes before S comes before W. It's sometimes necessary to cite a specific location within a document. And, not just documents, a specific location, a timestamp within a podcast or a video, or a particular location within a multi-page map, for example. Here, it's possible to name the author or authors, the year of publication, and then the page number, a page range, a chapter number, or a paragraph number. Now, the paragraph number usually occurs only with web pages because HTML, hypertext markup language, documents that make up most web pages that we view don't have page numbers because the viewer of the web page can control the type size, the font, or type style, type size, and therefore when the document is printed, it might, for one user, it may print on 3 pages. For another user, it may print on 5 pages of paper. It's also fairly common, particularly in graduate writing, to refer the reader not to the source of data, but to a source of complementary data. So one can use the phrase "see" and then refer the reader to the article for more detail. The "for more detail" is not necessary, but it's commonly used because it tells the reader why there's a referral to the other document. It's also possible to use Latin phrases such as et ali or exempli gratis. Here, I made a mistake here. Apologize for that. Exempli gratis means for example. So in this case, the writer is not telling the reader the data came from Smith, but an example of this data is available in Smith. And it's also common to include a reason for referring the reader to that example. If a citation needs to be made to a book or a magazine or even a web page in which an author is not identified, then the title of the book, magazine, or web page is used in place of the author. In the case of a book, the title would be presented in italics. In the case of a magazine article, the title is presented within quotation marks. If a group author were presented, such as a document written by NASA, not identified to a particular person within the organization, then the full name of the organization is used, and if it's expected that additional citations to that work will be used later in the paper, or additional citations to other works from NASA, then the abbreviation NASA can be created within the citation, and then that abbreviation NASA used later in the paper, even within the text of sentences. Properly identifying the sources of the data that you employ in your arguments is vital. If you do not properly identify data sources, you could violate your institution's academic honesty policy, possibly being charged with plagiarism. I've addressed plagiarism and academic honesty in prior videos, and I encourage you to watch those videos. Just remember, a charge of plagiarism could result in your being expelled from the institution. American colleges and universities take a very dim view toward academic dishonesty, particularly toward plagiarism. When you acquire your copy of the publication manual of the American Psychological Association, I encourage you to immediately review Chapter 8. There are many details related to citation that I have not addressed in this video, and the devil is in those details. Understand how citations are used, why they're used, and how to properly compose them in your documents. As always, I wish you the very best of academic writing. Bye for now.